Some powers rise with trumpets. Others arrive like a rumor. The United States was not designed, at least at the beginning, to command the entire world. It was an experiment, a frontier, a raw geography people crossed because they were desperate, not destined. When European diplomats spoke about America in the 19th century, they used a single dismissive word: provincial. A continent of farmers. No royal bloodlines, no palaces, no ancient legitimacy. This was a place that still feared its survival. It barely held itself together through civil war. It struggled to define who counted as its people. It worried about being torn apart from within. And yet, before anyone could really adjust their expectations, the 20th century belonged to it. Within a few decades, the United States held the world's reserve currency, enforced global security frameworks, and dictated the architecture of international trade. What happened? Why this place? Why so fast? We're taught explanations that sound neat: industrialization, military spending, democratic ideals, natural resources. But explanations like these are given after the fact. They turn stories into inevitabilities. They erase anxiety, luck, chaos. Maybe America didn't rise because it was powerful. Maybe it became powerful because the world collapsed first. Every empire needs a reason to emerge. America's reason was catastrophe. The trigger. Nobody teaches. Look at the world in 1913, the year before World War I. The global financial center was London. The imperial navies were British, French, and German. Russia and Austria were the old giants smashing into each other. The Ottomans were still alive, even if barely. The United States? A large market, yes. A rising industrial engine, yes. But a regional power, not a planetary one. A country that avoided entangling itself abroad. A country whose president, Woodrow Wilson, won office on the slogan, "He kept us out of the war." The real trigger for American dominance wasn't invention or oil or ideology. It was European self-destruction. World War I shattered the political and psychological structure of a world that believed empire was eternal. The old masters bled out in trenches. The monarchies collapsed. Currency systems broke. The colonial order looked suddenly fragile. And the bill for rebuilding, from wheat to credit, went through New York banks. While Europe ruined itself, America became the place capital fled to, not because it was civilized, but because it was intact. Is this leadership or vacancy? Is dominance earned or inherited from the weak? The power of arrival after disaster. The United States stepped into a void created by others, but a void alone doesn't create hegemony. There must also be a story of salvation. America offered loans to Europe. It offered supplies. It offered a fantasy that the world could be rebuilt without repeating the crimes of monarchy and imperial ego. Of course, the United States was not pure. It segregated its own citizens. It denied women political agency. It struggled to define its own democracy. But internationally, it played a different part. The stranger with money and no colonial history. This difference mattered. Britain ruled through ownership. France ruled through culture. Germany ruled through threat. What did America rule through? Liquidity. The dollar became the bloodstream of a wounded planet. That was leadership, not of swords, but of balance sheets. But history wasn't done producing catastrophe. World War II and the permanent vacancy. No one in Washington planned for total world responsibility. But Hitler did, and then Japan did, and then Stalin waited. Europe went back to war before it healed from the first one. Japan tried to dominate Asia through fire. Russia industrialized terror. And once again, the United States was late to the violence. It arrived after the oceans boiled and the continents cracked. Late, but decisive. 2 oceans protected its factories. Its cities survived. Its production soared. Its soldiers returned to homes that still existed. When the smoke lifted, London was damaged, Berlin was ash, Paris was traumatized, Moscow was paranoid, Tokyo was melted, and America was building highways. Leadership is rarely about who is morally superior. It is about who remains functional. The empire that didn't admit itself. The United States never used the language of empire. Empire was European. Empire required subjects. Empire was extraction and humiliation. America spoke of security, stability, freedom. But security was military presence. Stability was currency dependence. Freedom was acceptance of an American-led system. This wasn't hypocrisy. It was narrative technology. A new kind of power. Hegemony disguised as partnership. America did not conquer weaker states. It offered protection from stronger ones. This is the unwritten rule of the post-war order. When fear replaces ambition, nations trade autonomy for safety. America became global leader because the world was terrified. Terrified of Soviet expansion, terrified of nuclear escalation, terrified of economic collapse. And when people fear chaos, they choose the power that promises rules. The psychology of a reluctant superpower. Why does reluctant leadership work? Because it feels trustworthy. When someone demands power, we resist. When someone accepts responsibility for the greater good, we admire. American culture weaponized this psychology. Hollywood sold heroic intervention. Silicon Valley sold innovation. Universities sold meritocracy. The government sold alliance, and the world bought a feeling. If America leads, maybe we survive. Is that belief true? Irrelevant. It was powerful enough to institutionalize. NATO, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN headquarters on American soil, an entire world order built on a single idea. Europe and Asia cannot be trusted to manage themselves. That is the forbidden trigger. That is the emotional core. America rules because others can't agree. The dollar, quietest empire in history. Hard power terrifies. Soft power seduces. But financial power traps. The United States won't collapse if the euro weakens. But Europe might if the dollar abandons it. The United States won't starve if Asian markets panic. But Asia spirals if American consumers stop buying. This is not domination through violence. It is domination through dependency. Reserve currency status turned every crisis into a dollar movement, every recession into an American buying opportunity, every war into an American financing project. When the world saves money in your currency, your weaknesses become their problem. That is not empire. That is gravity, the myth of values. People insist American power is philosophical. Human rights, democracy, opportunity. But values don't lead. Values justify. China grows without them. Russia threatens without them. Europe claims them but fails to enforce them. What America truly exported was scale. Scale of consumption, scale of production, scale of narrative. A world that thinks bigger than local politics. A world addicted to global coordination, not ideology. Infrastructure. The real export was systemization. The unasked question. If America rose because others failed, what happens when others recover? What happens when Europe stabilizes? When China organizes? When India grows? When the Middle East unifies capital? Does leadership pass to whoever collapses last? Is global dominance simply survival extended across decades? We ask the wrong question when we ask, why did America succeed? A better question is, why did everyone else exhaust themselves first? Great powers fear challengers, but challengers fear themselves. Governments struggle to maintain legitimacy. Economies strain against inequality. Societies demand moral stories for political failures. Was American leadership the answer, or just a delay? History. Without heroes. When we romanticize America's rise, we miss the mechanic of history. The winner is the system left standing, not the system most noble. The Mongols didn't win Asia because they were civilized. Rome didn't dominate because it was peaceful. Britain didn't spread because it was wise. They endured. They filled the power vacuum. The United States inherited the 20th century because the 19th century elites bled out. Is that destiny or default? Reflection. What is leadership really? Maybe leadership is not greatness. Maybe it is the burden of holding together a frightened world until something else emerges. Maybe America was never an empire, just a caretaker of a broken planet. But care creates habits. Habits become dependence. Dependence becomes identity. So we return to the core question. Why did America become global leader? Because the world needed someone, anyone, to prevent another collapse. Because fear beats philosophy. Because stability beats sovereignty. Because functioning beats perfection. Maybe leadership, in the deepest sense, is not the victory of the best, but the resilience of the last. And once a system becomes the world's insurance policy, how does it ever step aside? That is the untold trigger. Not a resource, not a war plan, not an ideology, a vacuum, a silence, a waiting. Leadership is rarely achieved. It is accepted by a world too exhausted to resist. And once accepted, it becomes history's illusion. The illusion of inevitability. The United States became global leader not because it believed in itself, but because the world stopped believing in anything else. That is the part we don't teach. That is the part we rarely admit. That is the part we fear to ask. When collapse orders a successor, does the successor have a choice? And if they don't, is that power or responsibility wearing a crown no one wants? If you found this story fascinating, like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Questions channel, where we explore the civilizations, ideas, and mysteries that shaped humanity.